Last time, we looked at the constellation Virgo and uncovered its implications concerning the doctrine of the virgin birth. Moving forward into our second constellation, which will be the one called Aquarius, we have an opportunity to progress another step in understanding of the term living water. After our last meeting, I had a good email exchange with some questions about the nature of living water, how it should be understood at the literal level, and also what it accomplishes at the spiritual level for physical creatures like us. We'll get up to speed on all that, and also on something that we haven't covered yet, which is what the real spiritual version of living water actually is. Not just what it does, but what it is. Aquarius is depicted as a man pouring forth water over the earth. This figure is the source of all references in Scripture to the Son of Man performing essentially a mass baptism with living water, from which springs new life from the ground. This is what we call the first resurrection, when Yahusha's brothers and sisters are raised from the dead into spiritual immortality at his return. You can see that depicted in this painting with these blooms springing up out of death because they've been brought to life by the water being poured out by Aquarius. So living water pulls new life out from the grave, just like physical water does when it nourishes a seed in the ground. Let's look at some of these ideas reflected in the New Testament, where Yahusha refers to himself as this bearer of living water. John chapter 4, verse 10. When Yahusha encountered the woman of Samaria at the well, he said, "If you knew who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' then you would have instead asked of him, and he would have given you living water." So he's telling her, if she had recognized Yahusha for who he is, the fulfillment of Aquarius, the water bearer, then she would have known to ask him for a drink, instead of the other way around. In John chapter 7, verse 37, on the last great day of Sukkoth, or Tabernacles, Yahusha is at the temple during what was called the water-drawing ceremony, which was an annual rehearsal of a time that the prophet Isaiah spoke of, when we will draw living water from the wells of salvation. Yahusha takes this opportunity to cry out to everyone, "If any man who believes in me is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. As the scripture said, from my innermost being shall flow rivers of living water." So we're already in a place where we need some clarification on what he's talking about. I think we tend not to give statements like this the attention we should because it sounds like he's just being poetic. But if we take the time to track down scriptural synonyms for terms like living water, you can get a contextual definition that will help make sense of the message that Yahusha was trying to convey. In this case, it is available in the very next verse. Rivers of living water will flow from within them. By this he meant the Spirit. So living water is another way of saying a spirit. You'll notice that there is a plurality of spirits implied here, as it says there are rivers of living water. That is because collectively this is called the Spirit of Yahuwah, but it is described as having multiple attributes. There are 7 spirits that Yahuwah imbues his people with. The first place that we see this list of 7 is in Enoch chapter 61, verse 13 through 14. He shall call to every power of the heavens, to all the holy above, and to the power of Elohim, the cherubim, the seraphim, and the ophanim, all the angels of power, and all the angels of Yahuwah, namely of the elect one, and of the other power, who was upon the earth over the waters on that day, shall raise their united voice, shall bless, glorify, praise, and exalt with the Ruach Emunah, with the Ruach Chokmah and Netzach, with the Ruach Chesed, with the Ruach Mishpat and Shalom, and with the Ruach Ratzon, and shall say with united voice, Blessed is he, and the name of Yahuwah of hosts shall be blessed forever and ever. Revelation chapter 5 brings our attention back to the fact that Yahusha, the Lamb, is the one that is used to disperse the 7 spirits, pouring out living waters over the earth. Of the 7 spirits, we have the Ruach Emunah, which is the spirit of faith or trust. Remember, we looked at the title Emmanuel, Emunah, El, which, when applied to a person, means faithful witness of El, which is also what the term 7 eyes means. 7 is the number of perfection, so 7 eyes is a perfect, reliable witness. Then there's the spirits of wisdom, the spirit of long-suffering or endurance. The Ruach Chesed is the spirit of mercy. Chesed is where the word grace comes from, by the way. It means unmerited favor or mercy in context of the judgments prescribed in the law. Mishpat, Shalom, and Ratzon are the spirits of judgment, peace, and benevolence. All 7 of these spirits were entrusted to our future king Yahusha, because they are all what's needed to conduct a sustainable government. They are all qualities that a perfect ruler must have in order to govern righteously, which is why his brothers and sisters have to develop these attributes as well, so that they can also serve as subordinate governors and priests under Yahusha, the king and high priest, as a divine government over the kingdom. Remember, a spirit in this sense is not a ghost, it's a mental faculty or disposition, or even just an idea or doctrine in your mind. Our brains are transmitters and receivers of spirits that are communicated person to person through language and writing. And you are responsible for which spirits you store up and also send out, so you want to be a repository of good spirits like these, not the evil ones like wickedness, the spirit of lawlessness, the spirit of incarnation, the spirit of delusion. A temple that houses those spirits is not a temple of Yahuwah. If you are harboring righteous spirits, they will produce good behavior. Galatians 5, verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. If you think of the 7 spirits as personality traits, or character qualities, then these 9 things are the results of putting those habits into action, exercising those spirits into works of the law. But these are fruits, and that means that they take time to cultivate and grow. Something important to understand with this is, for a tree to produce fruit, it must take in water first, right? Without water, it will die and produce nothing but decay, no good fruit. In other words, without the spirits in place first, you can't generate these righteous outcomes. Because something like kindness, for example, has to be tempered with good judgment, which is one of the 7 spirits. Without the spirit of judgment, unmitigated kindness can become something evil, like the enabling of destructive behavior, or tolerance of sin in the name of compassion, which is what our country is progressively doing now. Joy can be a great thing, but it depends on the spirit behind it. Without benevolence or goodwill, you can have a hedonistic joy because people get pleasure out of doing harm to themselves and others all the time. Gentleness certainly isn't a righteous thing without the spirit of wisdom. For instance, it would be unwise to be gentle to an armed thief that has broken into your home at night. It is unwise to be so agreeable or pacifistic that you become vulnerable to your enemies. The takeaway here is, be sure to discern whether or not these fruits are in fact being nourished by living water, or make sure that there is a righteous spirit moderating what seem to be virtues we see in daily life. There are numerous demonstrations in Scripture showing that living water is required before you can even approach to enter into a covenant with Yahuwah. Yahuwah washes away our sin through baptism in living water, then forgives our sin by the blood of his firstborn, which covers the death decrees against us in the law. Yahuwah cleansed the earth with water at the end of the age of Gemini, before the restoration of the earth that we read about in the first few verses of Genesis. The Spirit of Yahuwah was hovering over the waters that had just made the earth clean. Soon after that, a covenant was established with creation, and Adam was given authority to rule over it. The goal of the kingdom is to re-establish that situation where immortal beings are made rulers over creation again. Mikvah is also required to enter into the new covenant, which allows you access into the kingdom and is reconfirmed every year on Passover. Now that many of us have realized that baptism is not a one-and-done thing, but a continual process of renewal that we repeat based on our individual spiritual status, we've been practicing the physical act of mikvah that we can now approach with a new level of understanding as far as what spiritual living water is and what it's accomplishing internally. Often before people reach this level of maturity, the common mistake is obsessing over the qualities of literal water, concerns such as, does it have to be running water? Does it have to be natural water directly from a river or spring? Can it be salt water, or does it have to be fresh water? What about a pool or indoor shower? None of that is relevant because literal water, used in baptism of the flesh, is merely a physical shadow of the spiritual truth. The water we use in ritual is simply for an outward show of an internal transformation. A physical demonstration, because we are still temporary physical creatures, confirming that we understand the spiritual implication. All that is to say, living water has no assigned physical parameters because living water is a spiritual or mental phenomena. What living water does is wash away death and sin to make way for a renewed creation, free of sin, or at least less affected by it, because the process of generating a perfected creature takes a lifetime. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 21. Baptism, which corresponds to this, now saves you, not as a removal of dirt from the body, but as an appeal to Elohim for a good conscience. With the continual ritual of baptism, we use water, which is an accessible representation of its spiritual counterpart, to wash the physical body. But what is happening beneath the surface is the spiritual living water is washing away our former self to progressively be renewed and replaced by Yahuwah's sevenfold Spirit. With all that understood, we can clearly interpret this section of Isaiah 44, which is a clear-cut recitation of the message in the stars of Aquarius. For I will pour water on the thirsty land, and streams on the dry ground. I will pour out my Spirit on your offspring, and my blessing on your descendants. They will spring up like grass in a meadow, like poplar trees by flowing streams.